I wasn't invited to my granddaughter's wedding, I told myself, and then my boy's voice sliced the hotel lobby like a cold wind. Useless old man, don't embarrass us here. Heads turned. Glasses paused mid-air. I reached for the door. A man in a navy suit caught my wrist and said in a steady gravel voice, "Sir, everyone must know who you really are." Breer. It should have been simple, an old man in an old truck driving a couple hours to watch a girl he loved say I do. Saturday sun on the windshield bugs ticking the glass coffee in a dented thermos that still remembered my wife's lipstick. That's how the day began, quiet, stubborn, no invitation needed. I left Austintown before sunrise. The Ford F-150 coughed, then settled into its familiar rumble. In the glove box, a folded paper map of Ohio, a velvet box with Mary's locket, a white envelope addressed to Liv. I figured I'd hand her the locket after the vows slipped the envelope into her palm and be gone before the cake was cut. The road to Columbus is honest straight where it can be crooked where it can't. I passed corn stubble and billboards for fireworks and injury lawyers. After Mansfield, a thin fog lifted off fields like steam off a steel ladle. I could almost smell the mill again, hot iron machine oil, sweat in the rubber of your gloves. I thought about the first time Liv called me Granddad Red, laughing at the hair I used to have. I showed her how to bait a hook at Mosquito Lake. She'd crinkle her nose and say the worm felt like a cold noodle. When her band marched at halftime, I stood by the fence with cocoa too hot for my tongue. Folks can tell you blood is thin. They haven't met my granddaughter. You might ask why I wasn't invited. Truth is, I don't know the one clean reason. Maybe it was a stack of small ones. Time piles up like plowed snow at the end of the drive, missed games when the mill called in emergency shift arguments with my son about money and pride, the empty chair at breakfast after Mary died. David got good at success, and I got good at keeping my head down. Somewhere in there, we stopped speaking the same language. A mile from the city, the highway widened and the buildings went glassy. I rolled the window down and the air smelled like wet concrete. The hotel stood like a ship of mirrors. I parked 3 blocks away, put the club on the wheel out of habit, and sat to steady my hands. My boots were clean, my shirt pressed, but I still felt like a man walking onto someone else's porch. I took the locket out, a small gold heart with Mary's initials on the back. She wore it when we said goodbye before I shipped out, and again when Liv was born. Inside, a little photo of Mary and a scrap of words, faded to the color of tea. Do right. Love long. I closed it, pocketed it, checked the envelope. The lobby smelled like peonies and polished wood. A girl at the welcome table smiled a professional smile and asked for my name. I gave it. Her eyes flicked down the list sideways, then back up at me with sympathy. "I'm not seeing it, sir." "Maybe a different spelling. I spelled it slow." She tried again. "It's all right," I said. "I'm not here for the chicken or the cake. I'll just sit in the back." "We have assigned seating for the reception," she said, lowering her voice. "Maybe you could check with family." Family. That was when I saw my son crossing the marble tie perfect jaw set. He looked good, prosperous, like the men in brochures for retirement plans. The way he looked at me, Sareed hoped I would do the sensible thing and stay invisible. "Dad," he said, quiet at first, "what are you doing here?" "I came to see Liv get married," I said. "I'll keep to the wall. I won't make trouble." He lifted a hand, half warning, half plea. "You weren't invited." "I figured churches don't card grandfathers," I said, and tried for a smile that didn't stick. His eyes dropped to my boots, the old scar on the toe from a dropped wrench years ago. He winced. Something old flared between us, pride, shame, both. "Please," he said tight, not today." "I'll stand in back," I repeated. "You won't even know I'm here." He looked past me at the welcome girl, then over my shoulder at people pretending not to listen. It was too late to be quiet. His voice climbed the lobby like a siren. "Useless old man," he said, "don't embarrass us here." There it was, public clean, like a bell struck on purpose. I felt it in my knees. A fork touched down on china and froze. I'm not a man who cries in front of people, but the tear glands have their own chain of command. My hand found the brass door bar. All I had to do was push, and I'd be back on the sidewalk, another invisible old man walking to an old truck in the city heat. That's when a hand took my wrist, firm, warm, sure, like it had known it for years. "Sir," the man said, voice steady as steel under leather, "everyone must know who you really are." I turned. The man's face was handsome and weathered hair the color of a winter field suit, cut so well it didn't need to brag. "Sergeant McAllister," he said, not quite a question. The room held its breath. My son's mouth opened and didn't find a word. The girl at the welcome table forgot her script. Before all that, I had the drive, the thermos, the locket, and the stubbornness that got me there. Whatever weather was rolling in, I told myself I was going to keep one promise show up for the girl. I squared my shoulders, tucked the envelope deeper in my pocket, and walked toward the sound of the organ warming up behind the ballroom doors. The lobby was too bright for an old man with a history. White marble, a wall of glass, a chandelier like ice. I stood with my hat in my hand and the scent of peonies cutting through whatever courage I had. The welcome girl tilted her tablet toward me as if a screen might offer mercy. "McAllister," I said. "Frank. Folks call me Red." She typed, bit her lip, tried again. I watched her face the way a mechanic watches a gauge. "I'm not finding that, sir," she said, soft but practiced. "Maybe you're with another party." "I'm with my granddaughters," I said. "Olivia McAllister, the bride." A pause, the ticking kind you feel in your teeth. She glanced toward the ballroom doors, where the organ was warming up with small rungs of sound. "We have assigned seating," she said. "Family is on the right." "Family," I repeated, trying to keep the word steady. Footsteps clicked behind me, quick and controlled. My son David stepped into the little circle like a lawyer at a deposition. Navy suit, silver tie clip, not a hair out of place. He set his hand on the table, not on me. "Dad," he said, the second syllable already a warning. "What are you doing here?" I turned so the hat hid my trembling. "Came to see Liv," I said. "I'll keep out of the way." "You weren't invited," he said. The girl looked down as if reading could make her invisible. "We sent a limited list. It's complicated." "Churches aren't clubs," I said. "You don't need a membership to watch two kids promise each other." "It's not a church wedding," he said. "It's here, and we have a schedule. Please don't do this." "Do what I asked. Stand quiet and clap at the right time." "Embarrass us," he said, barely above air. His eyes dropped to my boots, the old scar on the toe, my rope-burned hands. "They're clean, son." "That's not what I mean." "Well, then say what you mean." A few guests pretended not to watch us while absolutely watching us. "Please leave," David said, jaw tight. "You weren't invited. You were told." "I wasn't told anything," I said. "I wasn't told at all." There it was, the empty mailbox, the empty phone, the empty chair. He pinched the bridge of his nose like a man choosing his own headache. Kendra arrived with a robin's egg clutch eyes set to manage. "Hello, Frank," she said, using my first name the way some folks use a fence. "We're on a timeline." "I won't take long," I said. "Maybe today isn't the best day for surprises." "I could say the same," I answered. "Seeing my granddaughter married doesn't feel like a surprise. It feels like the job." Her smile thinned. "Let's not create a scene." "I didn't bring one," I said. "I found one waiting." David's patience snapped like a pencil. His voice rose clean and sharp enough to shave with. "Useless old man, don't embarrass us here." The room paused. The welcome girl's fingers froze. The organ notes faltered and held. I've been called worse by better men and lived, but it does something to you when it's your own. Heat moved through my chest like a furnace door swung open. I set my hat because that was better than letting my hands shake. "All right," I said. "It came out steady. I'll be on my way." "Thank you," Kendra said, already half-turned, the problem resolved before it set. David exhaled, shoulders dropping the way they do when a deal closes. I picked up my thermos, the metal cool, and faced the brass bar of the glass door. On the other side, the city waited with honest noise. I could walk 3 blocks, undo the club on the wheel, and point the old Ford north. Home by sunset, the envelope still in my pocket, the locket still warm. Nobody would know but me in the rearview mirror. That should have been the right thing. Polite in defeat, leave the pretty people to their pretty day. I put my palm on the bar and saw my face in it, an older man, jaw like a busted knuckle, eyes that remembered more than they wanted. A few memories flared quick and plain. Liv wobbling on her bike and me yelling, "Eyes forward, kid." Trust your legs. Mary pinning the locket at her collarbone in the hospital when Liv was born, whispering, "If love had a weight, it'd tip the bed." David at 16, staring at my boots like they were the reason he didn't fly. "Dad," David said again, quieter now, as if he'd noticed the hush too late. There might have been an apology in it, or the start of one. I pushed the door an inch. City heat reached through and touched my face. Tires hissed on wet pavement from a shower I'd missed. A bus sighed at a red light. "Sir," the welcome girl asked, voice a little trembly, "can I get you some water?" I shook my head. "Thanks, honey." Frank Kendra said, "Crisp, we'll send you photos." "I have plenty," I said. "They move." Boots on marble sound louder than they are. Mine announced each step like a gavel. 1, 2, 3. In another 3, I'd be a shadow on the sidewalk. In another 10, I'd be gone. That was when I felt it, a shadow leaning into mine, a presence that changed the air, a hand reaching through the space where a stranger becomes a neighbor. Fingers closed around my wrist, not rough, not timid, but certain, like a man who once held on and refused to let go. "Sir," the voice said, lower than most, with gravel from 1,000 unfiltered mornings. "Everyone must know who you really are." I turned. The hand belonged to a man in a navy suit that fit. Hair the color of late winter grass, eyes the color of steel on a cloudy day. He looked at me like a photograph he'd carried a long time. "Sergeant McAllister," he said. The brass bar was still under my palm. The city was still beyond the glass. But the room shifted the way a ship shifts when someone steps aboard who belongs to the sea. Sergeant is a word you don't hear in a hotel lobby, not if you've been out of uniform for half a century. Hearing it cracked something open in me, and suddenly I wasn't standing under a chandelier. I was back in a kitchen in Youngstown with a clock that ticked like it wanted to be heard. The fridge hummed. Mary's recipe cards leaned in a little wire, Stan the one with meatloaf stains where she'd dripped ketchup and laughed at herself. There was a time when David sat at that table, swinging his legs math book open, pencil chewing into a ragged spear. "You come into my game, Dad." He'd ask, not looking up, because boys think if they don't look up, they won't see disappointment land. I said I'd answer. "Kickoff's at 7. 6:30. I'll be there by the anthem." Sometimes I was. Too many times the mill called a hot repair and the siren went through you like truth. You don't ignore a hot repair. You don't tell molten metal to wait its turn. One night the BOF went sideways and we were still hosing it down when my phone buzzed and stopped and buzzed again. I couldn't hear it over the steam and shouting. By the time I got to the field it was dark. The scoreboard blanked, the band gone. A stray hot dog wrapper rolled like a little ghost under the bleachers. David was on the curb with his helmet in his lap. He didn't cry. He looked at me and did worse. He took a long breath and put a lid on something inside himself and said, "It's all right." "It's not all right," I said, sitting down beside him. Heat still lived in my clothes. "What did I miss?" "We won," he said. "You missed Mom yelling." "She's good at it," I said, trying to make him smile. "He didn't. You said you'd be here." "They called me in." "You always pick the mill." "I picked the mortgage." "I didn't ask for a mortgage," he said, a man's sentence in a boy's voice. At his high school graduation, I came straight from a shift because the guy on nights called in sick. I washed my face and hands in the locker room sink and scrubbed under my nails with a green bar brush till the skin burned white. I changed shirts, but kept the work pants because I didn't have time to drive home. The boots, I didn't see the oil until I was standing on the gym floor and the glare made every mark a headline. He saw it. The camera flashed and somebody laughed in a way that wasn't mean and wasn't kind, just the sound teenagers make when they've found a target that isn't them. David's neck reddened and his smile faltered, and then he put the smile back on like a man puts a lid on boiling. "Couldn't you have worn shoes?" he said later by the car. "These are shoes," I said, and tried for humor that didn't land. He blew out his breath. "Never mind. Son, never mind. There are words that fix and words that fray. I keep a pile of both in my pockets. That night I handed the wrong ones out. Bah." The summer we drove to Columbus for a scholarship interview, we took the old Ford because it and I understood each other. We left before dawn. Marge from next door handed us a sack with ham sandwiches and 2 apples. "Don't you come back empty-handed," she told David, winking like a movie ant. Somewhere south of Mount Gilead, the temperature gauge climbed like a bad mood. I smelled sweet steam before I saw it, a hiss, then a white flag from under the hood. I pulled over and we stood in the ditch with cicadas sawing at the air. "You gotta be kidding," David said, staring at the plume. "Upper radiator hose," I said. "I can patch it." "We're going to be late." "Give me 10 minutes. It took 20, with a roll of duct tape and the rag from under the seat. We made it to Columbus, but not to the interview. The secretary said, "I'm sorry, the committee just adjourned." She didn't say, "You smell like burnt coolant," but the air did. David walked back to the truck without speaking. I drove without turning on the radio. He didn't say I'd cost him anything, which somehow made it worse. When Mary died, the world turned down its volume, and then in bad moments turned it up too loud. For a while I kept a stool at a bar on Belmont where the beer was cheap and the lights were kind. There was karaoke on Thursdays. I didn't sing. A man next to me did Desperado, and he didn't have the voice, but he had the ache, and I let the ache stand in for me. One night David came in not old enough to drink mouth hard as a knuckle. "We going home?" he asked. "In a minute," I said. "You're slurring." "I'm tired." "You're sloppy." "There's a difference," I said, "and there is, but not to a son who has been carrying his mother's empty chair like a stone." He took the keys. On the porch he said, "I'm not going to be like you." "Good," I said, half meaning it and half bleeding. That's the trouble with grief, it turns every sentence into a double-edged thing. You mean to bless and end up cutting. In the garage, there's a shoebox with a rubber band around it. Inside, cloth as thin as breath, a couple of medals I never hung where anyone could see, and a photo so sun-faded, our faces are ghosts. Sometimes I opened it on a Sunday afternoon and put everything back before the coffee cooled. David never asked. I never offered. We built a country of silence between us and flew our flags on opposite hills. Folks say time heals. Sometimes it just organizes the wreckage. I kept working until the mill didn't keep me. There's no ceremony for a foreman when the last heat pours and the whistle blows. You just carry your lunch pail to the car and you don't look back, because if you do, your knees might not hold. I did decks, plowed driveways, learned the names of the neighborhood dogs. David moved to Columbus, bought shirts that didn't need ironing, found a church with a coffee bar and sermons about leadership. We were both building something. Mine had splinters. His didn't. Liv bridged us for a while, the way a granddaughter can be a country of her own. She'd call on Sundays and tell me about school-send photos of a cat that tolerated her love. I'd mail her a 20 and a card, and Mary's handwriting in my head would say, "Do right. Love long." When Liv said she was engaged, the letter smelled like lilacs. David texted a photo of a ring that belonged in a magazine. I wrote back, "Proud of you, kid." He wrote, "We'll be in touch about plans." The mailbox stayed simple. Maybe he thought I'd show up in those boots and stain the floor. Maybe he thought I'd talk about the mill until the guests needed subtitles. Maybe he thought Kendra's parents would measure him by my hands. Pride's a funny carpenter, it builds the very stairs you fall down. Sergeant McAllister. The word pulled me out of the kitchen, the gym, the bar, the broken-down shoulder of the highway, and set me back under the chandelier with my hand on a brass bar and my son's insult still ringing the air like struck crystal. I turned to the man with wintergrass hair and a suit that didn't need to brag. He was smiling the way a man smiles when he's found something he thought he'd lost, not his keys, not his wallet, something like a piece of himself. I hadn't heard that rank from a friendly mouth in decades. David had never said it. He preferred dad when he needed something, and sir when he wanted distance, and old man when he forgot himself. "Do I know you?" I asked, though the truth was already unrolling somewhere behind my ribs, a trail back to a night hot as a kiln and loud as God. He smiled the way a man smiles when he's found an old road home. His hand didn't leave my wrist until my palm left the brass bar and fell back to my side. "Sergeant McAllister," he said again, steadier now, "red." I hadn't heard that outside a Union Hall in decades. Under the good suit I saw a younger face, a pink line along his chin, a nose broken, once eyes that learned patience the hard way. "Do I know you?" I asked. "You knew me," he said. "Leonard Russo, Lenny." The name dropped through me and hit something solid. Rotor wash, red dirt, a kid yelling over a noise that ate voices. I blinked it back. This wasn't a night jungle. This was a chandelier, a welcome table, and a son whose mouth had made a wound of me in public. "My God," I said. He grinned quick, then let it go. "You look good, Red." "I look like a barn door," I said. "Solid, then." David slid in on my right. "Mr. Russo," he said, hand out, smile tight. "Apologies for the commotion. We'll get my father situated." Lenny glanced at the hand and then at me. He didn't take it. "This your boy?" "My son, David." "David," Lenny said, giving him a polite shake that wasn't warm. "We'll do some situating, all right. Frank and I need a minute." Kendra arrived with her robin's egg clutch. Mr. Russo, we're honored your family could join ours today, if there's anything. There is, Lenny said, still watching me. I need 2 minutes and a microphone. He turned to David. Your father's coming with me. I don't think that's David began. It is, Lenny said, not raising his voice. You can come if you like, but you're going to listen. Silence drew a ring around us. Lenny let go of my wrist and offered his hand, properly calloused in a way money can't buy back. He wore a wedding band with a nick in it. Old work lives in small scars. You saved my life, he said, simple as a folded napkin. More than once if we count the letter. David's head tilted. Letter. Walk with me, Lenny said. He nodded to the doors. Red, please. I followed. People parted the way they do for a bride or a problem. A young man in a tux had to be the groom, caught Lenny's arm. Dad is everything. Everything is exactly right, Lenny said. Tony, this is Frank McAllister. He's coming in with me. Tony's handshake was solid. Sir, he said and meant it. Inside the ballroom, light pooled on white cloth. Peonies sweetened the air. The DJ checked a mic and a stand-up bass hummed. Lenny steered us to a small alcove by a painted river. He set me with my back to the wall, and as to the room, old habit, give the man you're protecting a wall. First he said I should have found you years ago. I tried. The mill said you were gone. Everybody was gone, I said. They shut our whistle. He watched my face. Red. I carry a picture because of you. I started a company because of you. That's 2 lives I owe. You're not leaving. You hear me? I nodded. Under the flowers I could smell polish and the faint burn of electricity from the DJ's board. I hear you. David edged close, voice low. Mr. Russo, my father he's not well suited to all this. We have a program. I've got one too, Lenny said without looking at him. It starts with telling the truth. Kendra touched David's sleeve. Let him, she whispered. Across the room, Liv turned, scanning. Her gaze found me like a porch light finds a moth. Her mouth made a small O. I lifted my hand. She lifted hers, an old signal from playing Marco in the grocery aisles. She'll be glad you're here, Lenny said. She's got your spine. Her grandmother's, I said. Same thing. The DJ announced seating. Chairs scraped like rain. Lenny patted his inside pocket. A rigid rectangle pushed the cloth. You still hate microphones, he asked. Like dentists. Good. Means you won't say too much. Lenny, I said, you don't have to do this. I've had to for 55 years, he said. Been waiting for a room big enough. David rubbed his temple. This is my daughter's wedding. We don't need to. It is your daughter's wedding, Lenny said gently. And I'm about to give her a gift that won't wilt by morning. Tony came back, straightening his tie. You okay, Dad? Never better. Lenny squeezed his shoulder. Go stand by your bride. I'll be right there. He faced me. Red. I'm going to say 3 things when I take that mic. Who you were when I met you. What you did when I almost quit breathing. What your quiet did for me after we came home. I'll keep it clean. I'll keep it short. But I won't keep it quiet. I stared at the floor because the floor doesn't look away. I don't like making a scene, I said. This isn't a scene, he said. It's a debt getting its line through it. He slid a hand under my elbow like a man helping another into a pew. Walk with me. We stepped into the center aisle. People glanced up from napkins and phones. The band stopped fiddling. The DJ handed Lenny the mic with 2 hands. Lenny lifted it, tested the weight, and looked at me once more like a promise. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice filling the glass room without strain before we get to the beautiful part. I need a minute to talk about a different kind of beautiful, what a man does for another man when nobody's watching. My heart climbed my throat like a ladder in a narrow shaft. I slid my hand into my pocket and touched Mary's locket, cool as a coin from a country that doesn't exist anymore. Behind me I could feel David, my boy, go still. Lenny rolled the microphone in his hand like a socket wrench he trusted. He didn't look at notes. He didn't need any. At the edge of the aisle, the officiant closed his book and gave Lenny a small nod 1 minute, then vows. About 50 years ago, he said I was 20 and stupider than I knew. We were outside Da Nang. Night wet like a dog's nose, heat you could chew. Somebody made a noise they shouldn't have made, and the jungle decided it would have us for dinner. A few guests laughed uncertainly at dinner. He let the sound pass. I was a kid with a rifle and bad ideas. We stumbled into something ugly. The air cracked. You don't forget that sound. I went down behind a stump that wasn't big enough to hide a raccoon. Everybody who mattered was somewhere else, except one man. He turned and pointed at me. I felt 200 eyes land. I didn't know his last name then. We called him Red, because that's what you call a sergeant whose hair had the nerve to keep its color. He had a voice like gravel in a coffee can. When things went sideways, he didn't run toward the noise exactly. He ran toward me. The room, for all its crystal and flowers, changed temperature. I could smell rain that wasn't there. I could hear the rotor wash that hadn't started yet. I took a piece of something in the leg, Lenny went on, and a log got intimate with my ribs. I couldn't breathe right. I thought I was going to stay there and let the ants file their complaint. The jungle didn't love us. The jungle didn't hate us. It just didn't care. He lowered the mic a second and swallowed. When he raised it, his voice had that thin, clear line men get when they've decided to tell the truth. Red crawled to me, not a Hollywood sprint, on his belly. He got his shoulder under mine and said, "Kid, if you're going to die, you can do it on the helicopter." I told him I couldn't walk. He said, "Good, then don't. I'm not asking you to be fancy." There was a ripple of laughter, maybe at my words, maybe at the way he did my voice. I hadn't heard that sentence out loud since the day I said it. It fit me in the mouth like a tool that still knows the bolt. He tied something around my leg, hurt like we'd invented pain. He kept me talking about what stupid stuff. Pizza on Brook Park, a girl named Eileen who worked at the bowling alley, names of the Browns quarterbacks we ran out quick. I said I was scared. He said, "Me too. Keep your eyes on my boot, that one with the crack. We're going to follow it out." I remembered the crack left boot front edge, courtesy of an ammo crate that slipped in a rain squall. The crack was a map. Lenny had followed it like scripture. "Bullets don't know poetry," Lenny said. They didn't stop coming just because a decent man was doing something decent. Red kept moving. He took the brunt of the ground, for me dragging and pushing and promising things he couldn't possibly deliver, like the helicopter was already there, and I was going to be old someday. And you know what? I am. Soft laughter, a glass chimed, then went quiet again. We got to a clearing that was more mud than mercy. The bird came in. I don't remember climbing in. I remember this man's hand. He put it on my chest and said, "Breathe like you mean it." There was blood. Some of it mine, some of it his. I asked him his name. He said, "Frank." I said, "Like Sinatra." He said, "Like McAllister, don't complicate it." Then the noise carried me up and out, and he went back where decent men go toward the trouble. He stopped to let air into the room. Somewhere a fork touched a plate, embarrassed at itself. Liv's hands were clasped under her chin. Tony's jaw worked like he was chewing nails to keep from doing anything else. "I keep a picture," Lenny said. "Been in my wallet, 3 wallets now for half a lifetime. The sun bleached it down to ghosts, but I know those ghosts. One is me. One is him." He reached into his inside pocket and brought out a small plastic-sleeved photo bent at the corner like it had learned patience. He held it up. Guests leaned without meaning to. The photographer, God bless her instincts, stepped closer and angled her flash down. In the washed-out rectangle, a kid with mud on his face leaned into a man whose hair was darker than mine, whose jaw was set in a way that said he'd already made the tough decision, and all that was left was the work. My arm was around the kid's shoulders. His hand was clamped on my sleeve like it was the only good idea he had. "Folks," Lenny said softer, "this man over here is the reason I stood up this morning and put on this suit. He's the reason I came home married. Angela raised a son who knows which way is forward. He's the reason I built a company that put food on hundreds of tables." You ate on the strength of his grip without knowing it. I wanted to say something like I was doing my job, but the sentence felt small, and anyway, Lenny wasn't done. "Truth is," he said, "I tried to find him when we got back. Life gets loud. We miss things." Years later, I heard about a foreman in Youngstown with a back like a beam and a temper he kept on a leash. I sent a letter to the mill, no answer, and then they shut the whistle and young men stopped coming home dirty and started coming home tired in other ways. I figured I'd missed my chance to shake his hand properly. He turned and faced me so fully the room disappeared. We might as well have been standing on that brown clearing again, with the sky trying to decide whether to rain. "I owe you," he said, and the mic made the simple words bigger than any fancy speech could have made them. "I owe you for the breath in my lungs and the years in my pocket. And today of all days, I'm not letting you walk out that door like you don't belong." Something in my chest that had been braced for 40 years loosened by half. My fingers found Mary's locket and held it like a life ring. I didn't come to be a headline, I said, loud enough to carry, but not with a microphone. I came to give my granddaughter something that was her grandmother's, and to sit in the back like good furniture. You're going to sit in the front, he said, and you're not furniture. He looked past me, beyond me, to where David stood, stone still. Son, Lenny said not to me, to my son, the word landing strangely in his mouth. Your father's the kind of man other men stand up for. No one clapped, not yet. The room hung on a hinge. Lenny kept it. I'm not finished, he said, tone gentle but firm. What Red did for me in that jungle didn't end when the helicopter left. Coming home is hard. Money was dumb for a long time. Banks said no, and I deserved it. No collateral, but stubbornness. One day a note arrived at the Savings and Loan on Lorraine Avenue. Handwritten, union letterhead. Said I was a worker worth backing, signed by a foreman with a name I didn't know I knew. He tapped his pocket like a man checking for a match, then let his hand fall. We'll get to that in a minute. A murmur ran through the tables. Kendra glanced at David with a question on her face. David didn't answer because he couldn't or wouldn't, or because the floor had learned some new trick underneath him. Lenny brought the mic close again. Before the cake, before the speeches, before the dance, I wanted you to know who we're honoring when we say family. Not just the ones with place cards, the ones who showed up when showing up could get you killed, the ones who tie a tourniquet and keep talking and pull you toward the sound that means help. He lifted the glass of water from the head table, not his, took a sip, set it down. To Frank Red, McAllister, he said, and now the room knew it was time a man who carried me once when I couldn't carry myself. The applause started like rain hitting a porch roof, soft, separate taps, and then in a breath it was a storm hands loud enough to wake anybody who was sleeping on their feet. People stood that didn't need to. The DJ forgot himself and whooped. Liv put both hands over her mouth and then reached them toward me like she could cross the room by will alone. I didn't cry, not then. But my vision did what old television sets used to do when a storm came through, wavered, then sharpened. I looked at my son. He had the look a man gets when the map in his pocket turns out to be the wrong county. When the applause thinned to a human sound again, Lenny adjusted the mic like a man who knows the torque of small things. He glanced at me, then at the room. I said there were 2 lives I owe, he went on. One on a muddy night, one back home when the noise changed its clothes. He tapped his breast pocket. After I got back, I was a mess with boots. I knew concrete and sweat, not balance sheets. I went to the Savings and Loan on Lorraine Avenue, names gone now, swallowed by something bigger. The manager was a man named Kowalski, who wore the same tie every Tuesday. He looked at my hands and at my credit and shook his head like he'd found a dog on his porch that wasn't his. Lenny slid a small plastic sleeve from his pocket and held it up, an index card the color of tea, a union letterhead ghosted blue in the corner. A week later, he said this lands on his desk. Hand-delivered by a teller who liked my mother. It says, he squinted, not for show. To whom it concerns, I've supervised men for 3 decades, through blast furnace summers and 10 below Januaries. Leonard Russo takes orders, gives them when needed, and finishes what he starts. He'll pay what he owes before he eats his pie. If my name carries any weight in this town, let it buy that boy a chance. Respectfully, Frank McAllister, United Steelworkers Local, 1461, Shift Foreman, Youngstown Works. A low sound moved across the tables like wind through corn just before a storm. I recognized my handwriting, square, stubborn, everything printed, because I'd learned that men who guess at letters guess at numbers. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table with Mary's coffee going cold, lining up each word like a row of rivets, and hoping my name could lever something for a kid who'd once kept his eyes on the crack in my boot. Lenny let the sleeve tilt so the chandelier's glare didn't wash it out. Mr. Kowalski read it twice. Then he set it on the blotter like it was breakable. He asked me how much a used mixer cost. I told him. He asked what I had for collateral. I said, my mother's Buick and my good name. He said, your good name just walked in the door. He stamped the papers himself, $5,000 at 8%, not charity, a start. He looked at me again, and there was a shine in his eyes that had nothing to do with the chandelier. Red, you didn't put your name on my company papers, but it's under every pore. He reached back into the pocket and brought out a second relic, a money order stub creased to translucence. A month later, he said, smiling now, the mailman drops an envelope at my mother's. No return address I recognized. Inside this, $500 and a note on a torn grocery list for the down payment on the future. No strings. Steel ought to lift concrete when it can. Red. The room laughed soft at the wording, then quieted, because you could hear the smallness of the number and the largeness of what it must have felt like that year with beef at $1.30 a pound and gas doing what gas does. David spoke for the first time since the insult. You sent him money, he said to me, like the words didn't know how to live in his mouth. I kept my eyes on Lenny. I sent what I had, I said. A man ought to use his weight where it helps. Kendra's fingers were white on her clutch. The welcome girl forgot to lower her tablet. Lenny set the stub gently on the head table like it might break. I tried to pay him back, he told the room. 3 times I drove to Youngstown with envelopes that wouldn't take no for an answer. First time he wasn't home. Second time he said the mixer had already paid me back. Third time he wasn't in the mood to argue. He said, pay it forward. I'm rich in the only currency I care about, a day's work and people I can look in the eye. An embarrassed laugh in the back, some man recognizing himself and wishing he didn't. Russo construction didn't happen because a genius drew a perfect line on a napkin, Lenny said. It happened because a city still believed a foreman's name meant you could trust the concrete not to crack when winter got mean. It happened because a man who had already carried me once found a way to lift again without anybody clapping. He turned the letter toward the photographer. The camera clicked respectful as a church door. Liv stood now, one hand on Tony's arm. She was looking at me like a person looks at a sunrise they've never noticed from their own porch. Granddad read, she said across the distance, not loud, but the way rooms hear the right things. Why didn't you tell us? I didn't much think it was a story, I said. Just a Tuesday. Lenny took a breath and stepped closer to the edge of the dance floor, his shoes whispering on parquet. David, he said, and used my son's name the way a man uses a level, careful, deliberate. Your father's modesty is a virtue in some rooms. In others, silence turns into a lie. I can't let that lie have the microphone today. David stared at the plastic sleeve as if it might change what it said if he wished hard enough. The line between his eyebrows Mary used to smooth it with her thumb when he was 5 had become a canyon. Mr. Russo, he said soft, I didn't know. I believe you, Lenny answered. That's the problem. He faced the guests again. Angela, my wife, used to say, if a blessing lands on your plate, don't eat it alone. She's right. So I'm going to do what I should have done when the first mixer paid for itself. Red, I can't give you back the years you gave me, but I can tell the truth where it will bear fruit. He nodded at the bandleader who lowered his bow. He nodded at the MC who lowered his clipboard. This company, Lenny said, this name I'm proud of, rests on the quiet strength of a steel man from Austintown. From the rebar in our bridge decks to the sidewalks, you teach your kids to ride on Frank's handwriting is under it. You've been walking on his word. Applause, again, warmer this time, less shock, more heat. People turned to find me with their palms still moving. I felt my ears glow like a boy in church who'd been praised for carrying hymnals. Liv slipped free and came around the head table, her dress whispering like wind in corn. She hugged me with both arms and didn't let go right away. I smelled hairspray and something like lilacs. You are the story, she said in my ear. You're the good part. I patted her back and felt the locket under my fingers through the thin silk of my pocket. The little heart pressed into my palm like a heartbeat that hadn't decided whose chest to live in yet. Red, Lenny said, and when Liv loosened her hold, I saw he'd set the mic down. His voice carried without it. I've got one more thing for after the vows, something with your name on it, and a lot of other names that haven't met you yet. But before we get there, I want you where you belong. The maitre d' man built to keep order without looking like he was keeping order stepped forward and pulled out the chair beside Liv at the head table. The kind of chair with arms instead of just legs, a chair that said the sitter mattered. People made a path without being asked. My boots felt heavy and brand new all at once. When I reached the chair, I looked at David. He looked at the floor, then at me, then at the letter again like a compass spun and trying to find north. I sat where I had not expected to sit in this life. The seat fit, the tablecloth was cool under my forearms. Mary's voice visited like a soft draft, do right, love long. I slid the velvet box an inch out of my pocket and tapped it with a knuckle, reminding myself why I'd come and what I had to do before the music owned the evening. Across the dance floor, the officiant lifted his book. The room settled to a hush that knew what hushes are for. And under the hush, another sound started up, something old shifting in my chest, making space for whatever was next. Bah. The officiant's voice was a calm river. Vows were said without fancy trimmings, the kind you can hear over a lawnmower or a window fan and still know they're serious. Tony's I do sounded like a man tightening a final bolt. Liv's came out bright and clear, and I swear I felt Mary squeeze my arm from wherever good women watch these things. Rings, a kiss, that first soft roar of applause. The photographer herded them to the garden doors for pictures with grandparents and might as well be aunts. People exhaled, the organ quit, and a playlist slid under the chatter like a clean floor under summer feet. Plates came out on arms that knew their lanes. I stayed in the chair Lenny had claimed for me and let noise wash my edges. Folks stopped by the table to shake my hand the way men shake hands at a hardware counter firm, with a nod that says, "You got what you needed." A cousin from the groom's side said his dad poured concrete for Lenny in '92. "Good boss," he said. "Picks up a shovel if it's the difference." I said, "Then he learned it somewhere," and Lenny snorted. When Liv and Tony ducked back in hair, slightly winded from pictures, I stood. The room saw me stand and found a hush without being told. I didn't ask for a microphone. I didn't need one yet. "Kid," I said, and she stepped closer like she was still 5. I set the velvet box on the white cloth and flipped it open. The little gold heart lay in its nest like it had been saving itself for this table. "This was your grandmother's," I said. "She wore it the day you were born, and the day we brought you home, and the day you fed the cat jelly beans and learned why that's a bad idea." Liv laughed, the kind of laugh that has salt in it. I thumbed the hinge and held it up. Inside Mary's tiny photo and the scrap of handwriting, the ink now the color of tea. "Do right. Love long." "Would you do me the honor?" I asked Tony. A man should fasten his own luck. His hands were steady. He lifted the chain. Liv gathered her hair and he settled the heart under her collarbone like he was putting back a missing piece. The room murmured approval, the way cornfields hum when wind gets it right. "Thank you," Liv whispered, her fingers finding the heart. Granddad read, "I'll keep it warm." "That's your job," I said. "It's been keeping us warm a long time." I could have sat down then. I could have let the evening become toasts and cake and a first dance to something with a shuffle beat. But the weight in my pocket reminded me why my boots had carried me to a door where my name wasn't written. I took out the white envelope. It had my careful print on it, Olivia Ann McAllister Russo, because names grow and you ought to meet them. I slid out the pages heavy with ink the way truth sometimes is. "I wasn't going to do this in public," I said. "Truth is, I was going to slip it in your hand after the cake and get on the road before it got dark. But a man started a story I should have finished years ago. So I'm going to read one paragraph. Just one." I felt Lenny beside me, not touching, but right there like a stud behind drywall. The paper whispered. Somewhere a fork set itself down like, "Fine, I'll wait." Item 4, I read. Disposition of property. The residence at 218 Jackson, the 2004 Ford F-150 VIN ending 379, and the savings held at Mahoning Federal Credit Union account ending 411 shall pass to my granddaughter Olivia Ann McAllister and to the McAllister Russo Trade Scholarship established concurrently with this will to be held in equal shares. No one clapped. They didn't know if they were supposed to. That was all right. Clapping wasn't the point. I kept going. The scholarship will fund tools, boots, tuition testing fees, and first-year union dues for apprentices in Mahoning and Trumbull counties who can't afford the first step. Selection preference goes to applicants who can name a person they've helped this year without being asked. I folded my hands on the paper like it was a prayer. I picked that last bit because anybody can talk about themselves. I want to hear who they chose to carry. That tells you the kind of bridge they'll build. I looked at Liv. She was crying in the way that makes a face beautiful. No makeup ruined, just the truth widening her eyes. Tony had his jaw set again like the bolt needed one more quarter turn. Kendra's clutch had stopped breathing. David's mouth worked. "Dad," he said, but there weren't yet words after it. I put a finger on the page. Item 5 I read, because sometimes a man has to walk the length of the sentence or it doesn't count. My son, David McAllister, receives no distribution under this instrument. The air in the room thinned and brightened. It does that just before lightning finds a field. I didn't look at him right away. I spoke to the cloth. This is not because I don't love my boy, I said steady. It's because you don't give a man something if he can't carry it without dropping it on somebody else's foot. A legacy is weight. You don't hand it to someone who calls it junk. Now I looked at David. You called me useless son. In public. Maybe you believed it. Maybe you said it to keep your own picture pretty. Either way, you told me you don't know the weight of a name. So I'm not going to put mine on your back and watch you stumble through your own house with it. He stared at the space just left of my face, like there might be an answer there he could agree with. Kendra didn't touch him. She wasn't sure which part of him was safe. I raised the page a little so the print could carry if the words didn't. The will is signed and witnessed and lodged with Mahoning Federal. It's not theater. It's instruction. If I've got one good thing left to teach, it's this: we take care of the hands that build the future. We don't reward the mouths that tear at the past. I let the paper fall to my side. The room had found a new quiet. Not the hush of ceremony, not the breath before a toast. A work stoppage quiet. The kind where everybody hears the same thing and waits to see if anyone will pretend they didn't.
Lenny cleared his throat lower than the mic needed. "Red," he said. "You mind if I put my money where your name is?" "You already did," I said. "Not like this." He picked up the mic because some sentences deserve a speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "when I said I owed 2 lives, I meant it. I'm going to seed the McAllister-Russo Trade Scholarship today with $50,000, and I'll match up to that amount every year for the next 5 years. If you've ever walked on one of my sidewalks or let your kid ride a bike on one of our drives, you know why." A sound rose from the floor that wasn't applause yet. It was relief disguised as approval. "I'm not taking donations now," Lenny added, smiling toward the cousins already reaching for their phones. "Eat your chicken. Dance. Kiss somebody you promised to. If you still feel like it Monday, call my office. We'll make room." Only then did the clapping start earnest and unsure where to aim, and so it aimed at the table where a locket lay empty of its chain and a will lay full of its instructions. I folded the papers and slid them back into the envelope. My hands didn't shake now. I was doing the job. I was placing weight where it belonged. I was setting a tool in a young hand and saying, "Here, this will fit. Use it on your better days and your bad ones." Liv came to me again, both hands on my cheeks. "Granddad," she whispered, leaning her forehead to mine. "I'll carry it right." "I know," I said. David had sat down. He was holding the plastic sleeve with my letter to a man named Kowalski, reading the same sentence twice like a man new to his own language. The bandleader lifted his bow halfway, then waited to see if the room's pulse would let him play. It would, but not yet. I set the envelope by my water glass and took a breath that tasted like peonies and honesty. "All right," I said to no one and everyone. "Let's dance when you're ready." I didn't stand up to make anybody small. I stood because a man shouldn't leave a sentence half-spoken. The room was still in that way. Big rooms get when they've just remembered they're full of people. I nodded to the band to hold. The bandleader lowered his bow and smiled like he knew the beat would wait its turn. I picked up the microphone and heard the little plastic click of the switch. "I'll be brief," I said. "I came here uninvited. That's on me." A grandfather answers to his conscience, and mine said, "Show up. If I made anybody's job harder by walking through those doors, I'm sorry." I looked at the servers first because apologies should include the ones carrying plates. A little laugh worked the edge of the room loose. I turned to Liv and Tony. "You two," I said, "are the reason any of us put on decent shoes today. Here's my blessing for whatever it's worth. Fix what's loose as soon as it rattles. Carry what's heavy together even when you think the other one should carry it alone. And when you can't agree on anything else, do right and love long." I touched my pocket, the empty velvet box. Those words got us through more winters than Ohio deserves. Lenny stood near my shoulder the way a post stands where it should. "I owe a thank you," I said. Not for the kind things said, though I'll try to stand up under them. For telling the truth out loud when it would have been easier to keep the pretty version. A man with money doesn't always have to be brave. Tonight he was. A murmur of approval moved like wind through tall grass. The chandeliers looked less like ice and more like glass you could live under. I turned so I could see more faces than I missed. I worked steel, I said. A lot of you worked something. Concrete classrooms, kitchens, patrol cars, hospital floors. Maybe you never had a day where somebody clapped for you. That's all right. The bridge stands whether anyone remembers the poor. But I want to say it out loud once while we're all in our good clothes. This country runs on people whose names don't make it on place cards. Someone at a back table, older in a jacket that didn't care what season it was, said, "Here, here," and a few palms answered. I looked at David then. I didn't draw it out. "Son," I said plain, "we've got a lot of miles behind us and some of them were my fault. I missed games I promised I wouldn't. I showed up in boots I should have changed. I parked my grief on a bar stool and expected you to walk around it." The microphone made my voice larger than I've ever liked. I didn't lower it. "Those are my dents. You shouldn't have had to carry them." He nodded once, not trusting his mouth. I let the silence sit long enough to be real. But I said, and a wire sang in that word, "I won't wear useless. Not from you. Not here. I never asked you to be proud of me. I only asked you not to be ashamed." You could feel the sentence go in. Some folks looked at the ceiling the way people do when they don't want to drip on their own shirt. Kendra stared at her hands like they'd started a complicated task all by themselves. "I didn't come to punish you, David," I said. "That paper I read is instruction, not a whip. If you're going to inherit a name, you treat it like a tool oil. It use it right, hand it back better than you got it. Today told me you're not ready. That doesn't mean never. It means not yet." He started dad eye and reached without meaning to. I shook my head once, gentler, then a no. After the last song, I set out by the loading dock where the air is honest. You and me can talk like men. No microphones, no audience. We'll see what we can fix and what we have to carry. I let the mic fall a little so the next words were more for him than for the room. "I'm not shutting the door, son. I'm just making you knock." He blinked hard. Something old in his posture loosened, not forgiveness, not yet, but the muscle you need to turn toward it. I raised the mic again. "As for the rest," I said, "the scholarship is real and it starts Monday. Lenny's putting skin in it. I'll be there to sign. If you've got a kid who'd be great with a wrench or a trowel, but can't afford boots, send them. Tell them the first rule names someone you helped this year without being asked. If they can't, we'll teach them how before we hand them a check." That got the laugh I wanted, warm, a little proud. A man at a side table with a union pin gave me a small salute that looked like he'd been waiting a long time to give it.
I set the mic down. "That's enough noise from me," I said, and the bandleader took it as the cue it was. He bowed his head to his players and counted off something old and good that knew how to put feet on a floor. Before the first note landed, Liv wrapped me up again. "Granddad," she said into my shirt, voice thick with happy ache, "I want that talk with Dad to go right." "So do I said. "But if it goes crooked, that's all right too. Crooked lumber still holds a porch if you know where to put it." Tony shook my hand with both of his. "Sir," he said, eyes bright with a young man's vow, "I'll carry weight with her." "Then you're already family," I said. People started moving, the relief of permission. The DJ faded the playlist under the band, so the shift felt like something the room had chosen together. Lenny lifted his glass an inch in my direction, not a toast, just a signal between men who'd found each other again along a long road. I nodded back. We didn't need more. On my way to my chair, an older fellow stopped me. Dress blues in his bones, not on his back. He leaned in and said, "Da Nang," and I said, "Close enough," and he tapped 2 fingers against his heart. "Welcome home," he said. 2 words heavy as freight. I carried them to my seat like a new tool. Kendra passed by without meeting my eyes, then turned and touched my arm with her fingertips. "Frank," she said, voice careful, "I didn't know any of that." "I know," I said, "now you do." She nodded, something complicated crossing her face, then went to stand with David. They spoke without moving their mouths, much the way couples do when they're learning the cost of weather. The band settled into a slow number you can dance to even if your knees complain. Liv and Tony took the center. The locket caught the light and sent it back to the ceiling in a little gold heartbeat. Folks joined in twos and threes. Plates were cleared. The world which had been paused hit play. I sat finally and let the chair tell my back what it needed to know. My hands didn't shake. The insult had stopped ringing. In its place was a quieter sound I recognized from long ago, the thrum you hear when a beam seats in the pocket it was shaped for. I didn't belong on the place card. I belonged here anyway. We danced just long enough for the room's shoulders to drop. Then I slipped out the service corridor where the carpet gives up and concrete takes over. The loading dock door stood open to a square of honest night. The city hummed. A delivery truck idled down the alley with a sound that reminded me of a tired dog trying to be good. David found me there. He didn't rush it. He stood beside me the way men do when they need to say something they can't get back. I shouldn't have said it, he began. His voice wasn't the lobby voice. It was the backyard voice from when he was 8 and the kite tore itself out of his hands. I was trying to keep the picture neat. Pictures don't stay neat, I said. They live in wallets till the corners go soft. He worked his jaw. I was ashamed of the boots, the bar, the missed game. I let the whole story turn into those 3 things. I gave you pieces to pick from, I said. You picked the sharp ones. He laughed once without humor. I did. We watched a bus break at the corner. Air hissed like a valve finding its seat. You hurt me, I said, because a wound cleaned is a wound that closes, in public. You did that. He nodded. I did. I can't hand you weight while you think the man who made it is scrap. I won't. I know, he said, and the words cost him something. I need to learn what it weighs. That's the job, I said. It's always been the job. He turned his face to the doorframe and pressed his thumb along the raw edge like he needed to feel something real. Would you teach me some of it? When I can, I said. When you're not asking me to disappear. You knock, I'll open if I can. If I can't, you knock again. He breathed out long and uneven. I'm sorry, Dad. Me too, I said. For a lot of things. We'll fix what rattles, we'll carry the rest. He looked like a boy for a second, the boy on the curb with the helmet in his lap. Then he straightened, which is what men do when they're trying to be useful. I'll see you Monday at the bank, he said, if you want me there. Monday, I said. Bring a pen that writes. He smiled, small but true. I love you, he added, and flinched like he'd stepped into cold water. Me too, I said, because we're not a family that gilds the lily. It was enough. Headlights swung into the alley. An old F-250 rolled up paint the respectable color of primer. Lenny leaned across the bench seat and thumbed the passenger window down. You two all right, he asked. We're headed that way, I said. Good. He drummed the wheel with 2 fingers. Couple items of business, my office, 10 a.m. Monday, scholarship papers, second training yard on West 130th next month, Saturday. I want you talking to apprentices about keeping their thumbs in their word. You sure they want to hear from a man with both thumbs and a mouth that gets him in trouble? I asked. That's the kind they remember, he said. Bring the boot with the crack if you still have it. I do. Good, he said again. Get some sleep. You look like a man who fought a war tonight. He drove off with a short honk that meant we're square for now. I went back in and let the night run its course, the way nights do, cake more dancing small mercies. I left before the last song the way I'd planned, only now my hands were lighter. The Ford started on the second try. I pointed north. The highway emptied in front of me like a belt paid off. The radio found an AM station out of Cleveland playing oldies that remembered the words better than the notes. I sipped the last cold swallows from the thermos and thought about Mary humming in the kitchen while the evening news lied about the weather. The locket was gone from my pocket and right where it belonged. The envelope lay on the seat with a fold that would leave a scar. I didn't mind. Good tools earn their marks. A deer tried to make a point about 2 a.m., and I tapped the brakes to let it win. The trees on the berm leaned in like they had gossip. I laughed once quietly at nothing and everything, and the sound felt like a valve loosening. Home smelled like old coffee and clean laundry. I set the envelope in the drawer with the warranties that don't apply anymore, and slept like a man in a house that knew him. Morning brought Marge and a knock that never waits. She came in with 2 paper cups and the Youngstown Vindicator folded to a picture of a chandelier and my surprised face under it. Headline, Local Veteran. Honored at granddaughter's wedding. Scholarship announced. About time somebody printed something that isn't the crime blotter, she said, handing me a cup and a look that could whip cream. You did good, Red. You did it plain. Plain's all I got left, I said. She sat, opened her reading glasses, pushed them into her hair like 2 small antlers. So, the boy. We're going to talk, I said. It'll be messy. Messy still holds if the studs are right, she said, stealing my lines. She tapped the headline with a fingernail. You make that money move. Monday, I said. Lenny's office at 10. She nodded like an old foreman at a good weld. Bring me back a copy of the papers. I want to put them on the church board. We got grandsons need boots. Done, I said. Monday came the way Mondays do, coffee that tastes like a job. Lenny's office had a conference table big enough to land a canoe. We signed where the tabs told us to shook hands the way men do when ink turns into something heavier than paper, and set a date with the vocational school to meet the first batch of applicants. A week later, I stood in the shop at Mahoning County Career and Tech. The air held the warm tin smell of machines. An air compressor thunked itself awake and dozed again. Kids in coveralls leaned on their heels the way people do when they don't know yet which way they'll fall. I told them 3 short things. Keep your thumbs. Keep your temper on a leash. Keep your word, like it's the last tool on the bench. Then I held up a simple crescent wrench. Who did you help this year without being asked? I said. Name them. If you can't find someone by Friday and then come back and tell me their name, the money knows which hands it belongs in. A skinny boy with oil already living in the lines of his palms raised his hand. I fixed Mrs. Green's porch step, he said. She paid me with rhubarb pie. Then you're already rich, I said, and handed him the wrench like knighting only useful. On the way out, I walked the hall with the old poster's eye protection ladder safety, the one about how a clean shop is a quiet mind. My boots squeaked where some mop had gotten ahead of itself. In the glass of the trophy case, I saw a man who would never be on the cover of a magazine and didn't need to be. The name on my shirt still fit. Back home that night, I sat at the kitchen table where Mary once wrote grocery lists in a curl I could spot from the driveway. I set the paper down and let the clock tick. The house settled the way old houses do when the heat cuts off small pops wood, remembering. I thought about a lobby and a hand on my wrist and a sentence spoken into a room that needed to hear it. I wasn't invited. I showed up anyway, and when I did, the day told me where I belonged. If this story sat with you a while, do something gentle with it. Call the person you owe a thank you. Share this with someone who needs a reason to keep showing up. And if you'd like to hear more plain tales about work, love, and the weight we carry, subscribe and stay for the next one. We'll keep the coffee warm.